How does a typical developer workday look like? Last time we already spoke about developer productivity and how it correlates to satisfaction in your daily workday. Today I'm going to give you a few more interesting insights on developer workdays that I took from two interesting research papers that I'm going to link in the description. First, I want to give you a rough overview about how much time is spent each day on certain categories of work. So number one is programming of actual features. And that is only about 15% on average, according to this one study that I looked into. So not that much, it's maybe 1 or 2 hours each day that is actually spent on developing features. A much bigger portion, about 25%, is bug fixing and testing. So about a quarter of a developer workday is spent by finding the actual reason for a bug and fixing those bugs, as well as writing tests, performing tests, improving them, and so on. So that's quite a big portion. Then there is work on specifications, doing reviews, documenting things, and so on, which is about 10%. Of course, it varies from person to person. Some people are doing more of that work. Some people are doing less, but on average, that's a rough guess, 10%. Then there's meetings and email, which is also about a quarter, 25%, like the bug fixing and testing part, that is spent with meetings and email. Most of it is actually planned meetings, and I just put email into this category of communication. Then there is helping others and spontaneous communication, which is again about 10%. So when a colleague calls you and needs some support on a topic that you are experienced with, that would fall into this category, as well as when you're communicating in a spontaneous way, maybe over chat, or maybe you have a short call with a team member to discuss some ideas or solutions. And last but not least, 15% is actually accounted for infrastructure topics like fixing infrastructure issues, maybe on your local machine, a bit of learning, and also taking a few breaks throughout the day. So that's about it. That is a very rough overview. And now I want to go into a few interesting findings about this. And let's start with actually writing code. So on average, as you might have already guessed, developers don't spend so much time on writing code, but they are actually spending more time on collecting information that they need for implementing things or fixing things. And they also spend a lot of time collaborating with others. That is a bigger portion on average than actually writing code. So that is especially true for more senior engineers. According to this research, they spend more time on activities like clarifying specifications, participating in meetings, and of course, helping others. Interestingly, seniors also tend to value these activities more than their junior colleagues. Of course, that is just an average. It's not always true for each individual, but it's a tendency. According to this one study, the longest typical time of uninterrupted programming was about 47 minutes. So not quite an hour is considered pretty good and unusual to focus on a programming task. That is also pretty interesting. I think it's not that long of a time frame, but when you can go for about 1 hour without any immediate distractions, that is pretty good. Then there's meetings, and meetings are often unpopular across IT people because they are commonly considered a time sink, and they can be a time sink. But interestingly enough, according to the study, developers do not consider them bad by default. Rather, meetings are considered more useful during specific phases of development, namely more collaborative phases, like when you need to plan things, when you need to do specification or release management. Less so when the steps to implement are very clear and when focus matters a lot. Then is the time for less meetings. And one study reported the average daily time developers spend in meetings as 19.5%. So about 20% on average is spent in meetings. Then number 3 is emails. So there's a popular belief that emails are a strong source of distraction and dissatisfaction. I can imagine that's true for some professions, which have a lot of contact and communication with emails, but actually shows it's not really the case for developers. Very few in this study reported emails as a source of dissatisfaction or as a time sink. Side note from me, I wonder if that is because of the popularity of chat tools by now. So it might be useful to look into chat tools. That was not really part of the study. And maybe they have replaced a lot of email conversation by now. So it might be useful to look into those instead. And the last point is helping others. Now, helping others is generally considered useful and fulfilling. That is understandable. I also have this experience that it can be a very fulfilling task to actually share knowledge and support others. But there's also this situation where it can go too far and developers are actually so involved that they cannot make progress on their own tasks. So there can actually be a strong conflict between individual progress and team productivity. So it's important to actually acknowledge when someone is spending a lot of time in supporting others. Maybe you are the most experienced person in terms of the tech stack in your team, or maybe you are really well versed in the company's product and the business requirements. So naturally you spend a lot of time helping others in their onboarding process, understanding the requirements together, setting up their work environment, helping them with getting an overview about the infrastructure or tech stack and so on. And then, of course, you have less time to work on the actual implementation of features, bug fixes, and so on. And that can be a conflict, and companies should acknowledge those actions as valuable and not just look, for example, at how many tickets have been processed in this sprint. That would be a very one-sided way to look at things. Okay, that was it about my findings about developer workdays and productivity. What is your experience with the topics that I described? Does it match your expectations, or were you surprised by some of these findings? Would you actually like to add more things from your experience? Tell me in the comments.